All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to SaberSim's office hours. Scott and I are hijacking Andrew's show here today, but for good reason. We've got some big new product updates that just hit the beta site here earlier this afternoon. Scott and the entire team have been working really, really hard on this for quite some time this summer here to get this out ahead of football season, and we've got it ready for beta as of this afternoon. And I believe, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got this beta open to everyone right now to check this
Uh,
out. Is that correct?
it is just pro like it normally is for now,
Okay.
but I think we will likely change that sometime before next week. But for
Okay.
now, it's
So
pro and ultimate users.
jump the gun a little bit there, but still
Yeah.
very excited to get this out here and get this in the hands of people. Pretty big update here overall. A lot of improvements. We'll spend some time here walking through this for a build for the DraftKings MLB slate tonight, just so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. Answer any questions that pop up in chat. But before we actually start pushing buttons and turning knobs here, Scott, do you want to kind of provide a little bit of background for people just from what the inspiration was for these changes, what our goals were here, the things we saw in the current production app that we didn't like so
Yeah.
much?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of this comes down to the idea that we want, and most of us, when we play DFS, we want to feel like, yes, we have a chance to win contests, to win money, right? But also it should be fun, right? We want DFS to be fun. And we realize that even though our tools are super powerful and they do more than
Mm-hmm.
anybody else on the market, a lot of times the application kind of fights with you a little bit about what it is that you want to do. Our workflow was always a little bit clunky, especially as we started adding things like contest sims on top of what was already there. If you remember when we released contest sims
Mm-hmm.
around this time, I think it was around this time last year, give or take. I can't remember exactly when it was. We just kind of plop those down on top of what was already there within the application, right? It was never really designed explicitly with the idea that users might want to go end to end with a contest as their primary means of dealing with DFS entries. So we really took a step back and tried to rethink the entire DFS workflow from beginning to end so that the app was a complement to what people are trying to do, which is get really good lineups into contests, right?
Mm-hmm.
And would still allow you all of the flexibility and power that the current production app provides, but with significantly less friction to getting from point A, uploading contests, to point C or D, which is entering those contests back to the entering those lineups back to the DFS provider. So a lot of our inspiration was drawn from that idea of allowing users to focus more on like building good lineups
Mm-hmm.
and making the changes that you want to make to get the kinds of lineups you want into your contests, so you can and making you spend less time just fighting with the tool, or fighting is probably the wrong word, but trying to figure out how to get all of your lineups into the contests that you want to get them in, ranked the way you want to get them ranked. So really putting a lot of that power back in your hands as the user to be able to really focus on the things that people want to do, which
Yeah.
is like build good lineups. So that was a lot of it. I think, and a secondary goal, which I think people will see as we move into the rest of this year and going into next, is that this change really gives us a better foundation to build new stuff off of as well. I think this is really going to allow us to do some of the things that people have been asking for a long time in a really more meaningful way than we ever could have done before. So it was both important work and necessary work, but I think it's also work that everybody can benefit from both now and in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think if I could summarize a lot of the changes, I think it makes things more intuitive and it makes things more streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
Features show up in the place in the app where you are more likely to use that thing at that part of the process, and
Mm-hmm.
things that we recommend people do over and over and over again that require in the production version of the app a lot of button presses to do and a lot of time to do effectively, um, are now just something that you can do much more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Recording videos and doing streams, and I'm sure Andrew has felt this before. I've always felt a little uncomfortable with this idea that sometimes we recommend people to do things that aren't strictly the the most optimal way to do them, but we recommend that because it is so complicated to do the optimal thing in the production version of the app, especially with getting the right lineups into contests, which we'll talk about here in a second. That's one of the biggest things that has improved here, is I think that process has gotten a lot easier. So now, instead of saying, well, yes, in a perfect world, you should do X, but you're not going to have enough time for X and you're probably going to mess something up, so instead do Y. Now we can just say, do Y. So anyway, we'll go ahead and actually walk through what that looks like in a second here. But before I start actually kind of jumping in, any other thoughts, or Andrew, anything that you wanted to say before we got started here?
I'm probably closer to a lot of the users here, so I'm just as excited to hear you guys talk about this.
Cool. All right, let's start messing around. Let's start playing around here. So I will say one thing off the bat. You'll notice the first time that you log in, and we're not seeing it here, but you'll actually be directed to select a slate upon the first time. I've already been logged in here, but you'll be directed to select a slate for the first time. And when you load a slate, expect it to load you first to the contests page. And this is really just a small change here. The main point of this here, though, is the first thing that you should be doing when you sit down to build your lineups for the slate is, of course, uploading your entries file for that slate here. And when I do that, it'll give us an opportunity to see one of the first really cool changes here. And that is your contest sim settings, first of all, are now managed in the contest tab. They're also automatically created for you when you create the contest. Just as on production, if you were to right-click a contest, say the Minimax, we know what the right field lineups are, the right entrance, the right payout structures, all of these things here. Well, upon uploading your entries file, we know you're playing that contest, and we know that you probably ought to be running a contest sim for that contest. So now we are creating those contest sims automatically here for you for each of those contests here. You can still create contest sims for any other contests that you might find here. So if I wanted to create a contest sim for, say, let's just say like a high stakes contest, we can right click that, add a custom contest sim. I can just take exactly what the appropriate, take the metrics here from that contest here and use it. You can also customize this accordingly here, create your own different contest sims. But we know generally that I probably want these contest sims created because they correspond to the contest I'm playing tonight. So now that is automated for you. Scott, anything to add on kind of the contest sims, uploading your entries file, this page in general?
Yeah, so two things real quick. Number one, if you really hate opening up the contests first, we have a toggle in the menu that you can actually turn off so that you'll load to a default build like the old days. So that's there if you really hate this functionality. And number two, if you could open up that right-click menu to add a contest sim for me, Jordan, I just want to show something real quick. I'm sure at this point, most people have heard about the changes to contest sim ROI recently that try to scale based on how many entries you have in a particular contest. If you want to simulate as if, Jordan, can you bring that menu back up for me?
Yeah, sorry.
If you want to simulate as if, like with the old kind of independent ROI method that treats every lineup independent of every other lineup, you can actually just duplicate the contest sims for whatever contest you are playing here in this modal, but then change the user entries field that's there to 1, and that will simulate as if you have a single entry in that contest, and will treat every lineup in your pool as an independent lineup and be rated independently based on ROI. So it's basically a way to get back to the old, I'm going to call it the old method. But if you really want to evaluate your portfolio as independent lineups, you can still do that. You just need to create a custom sim to do that with.
Cool.
Just one question on that. For the user entries in the content that I upload, it's reading from the entries tab or the max allowed?
It's the number of entries you have in the contest. So if you've entered 20 times, it treats it as a 20. If you have a single entry in, even if it's an 150 max contest, it treats it like it's a single entry, like that you have one entry in the contest.
Cool. That's awesome.
Cool. All right. So Next up, let's bounce over to a build. There are definitely some things that visually look a little bit different here. This is something else that I think feels quite a bit more streamlined here once you get familiarized with it. But the big one is the entire tab for build settings is now just incorporated into this projections tab here. So the contest sims, I guess, with the exception of contest sims, which are managed in that contest tab here, but you'll see some of the lineup building options here in the upper left. Your lineup rules here are now tucked into the upper right, looking very familiar here, but just more information available to you on screen from this build screen here. The pool and the number of lineups as separate fields has just been consolidated into a single field. We will read the number of lineups that you ultimately need for your contests here upon building. We'll see that in a second here. But this field is really now just how many lineups do you want to build? There's less of a discrepancy of, I know something especially for new users, pool size was actually a pretty confusing field for people just getting started, often mistaken for the size of the contest or the number of actual entries they were playing. That's gone now. It's just how many lineups do you want to build is tucked in right here. Similarly, the build settings themselves here is now in this little gear icon here. You've got still the build mode. You've got the slider settings. One thing that did jump out to me pretty quickly here is that we now just have the sliders themselves. We don't see the contest type, size, entry limit dropdowns. Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about how that is now working, how these things change, how these are set?
Yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds. I think there'll be plenty of time, through Discord to answer deeper questions. But I guess at the top level, the defaults we've not changed how we set the default sliders. Like that is still the same as it's always been, based on the size of the slate and the sport you're playing. Like all that logic is still the same. So there's no underlying change there. One of the reasons why we removed the discrete drop downs for contest size, though, is that really, except at the extremes, right? Like at Sim Diversity 10 versus Sim Diversity like 3 or 4, or correlation 9 or 10 versus correlation 0 or 1. There just isn't a huge functional difference in the kinds of lineups. Like there's small differences, right? But the differences are not really worth the questions, or the questions is the wrong word. The difference of setting those modals here. And frankly, I think there's a lot of back testing required that goes into making sure those settings are just right. We are way more confident in our defaults for each slate than I think we are in the independent drop downs. If you have settings you like, keep using them. Nothing has changed with how we build your lineups. So if you want to run higher diversity or things like that, by all means do that. But we've really just tried to streamline this into settings that are optimal for, the slate that you're playing, less focused on the different contests you may want to build for. If you're playing smaller contests, by all means drop Sim Diversity or correlation a little bit if you want to. But I think the real goal here is to focus on letting you get from projections to lineups quickly. And if you don't have a reason to change the sliders, like if you don't have a discrete, like I know I want more correlated lineups or more diverse lineups, there's not really much of a reason to have to change from our defaults that have been well tested over a long period of time to be optimal for the scenarios where they're being used. So it's just really an attempt to streamline the whole build process.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where I think we've kind of been moving in that direction over time, at least in the way that we've recommended people use the tools, especially post-contest sims. Like I've moved completely towards just using a single build for all of my different lineups and essentially never changing the sliders at all. We've talked in content about choosing like a midpoint value of your entry limit and your contest size to set those default sliders. This is one of those spots where we just kind of looked at it and said, everyone on the SaberSim team is doing this in the same way. In every single video we put out, we recommend people do this the same way. Why don't we just do that? Why don't we just set the sliders so that they build a strong, viable pool of lineups across a relatively wide spectrum of contest types for this slate, and then identify the best possible lineups to put into each of your contests with contest sims, and even to a lesser extent Saber Score. And that's kind of how this now works here. So
you said that way more eloquently than I did, Jordan. So I'm just
I
gonna
think
have
you
you
did.
talk for me the rest
I
of the
think you
time.
did a fine job. No, it's good. You got the wheels turning for me. It's good. So let's build some lineups. Anything else like before I actually just hit the build button that you wanted to call out specifically here?
No, I mean this whole screen has not really changed much other than just like visual updates to just makes it look a little bit better. But like everything is still here essentially that you were doing before. There's been no real major changes to the pre-build projections process.
Probably the only thing is rules is next to filters, right? I think people might expect that to be over on the other side, but still there.
Yeah. But there's been no functional change to how rules work. It's just literally in a different spot.
Cool. Okay, let's build some lineups here. Make 2 quick changes. And
now this is where the fun begins.
Yes,
this is where the real fun starts.
Cool.
While these are building, I guess I'll just call attention to a few other things that people may have noticed.
Yeah.
The download button for when your entries are ready to go is now on the contest tab rather than a separate button off to the left there. So it'll still like flash green when it's time to download. It's just, again, just to give us a little bit more space in that header and also to put it in a more logical location. So that's there now. And you've probably also noticed that there are actually only 2 panes now. There's not 3. So remember, we used to have 3 panes here. So you really only have to manage 2 different panes, one for lineup and one for projection. So again, get you more screen real estate to be able to manage stuff. You may also have noticed these vertical panels, which I've been looking at for so long now as we've been working on it. I forgot these are like new the way we've done, but we've got these panels to give us more header space in each one of these panes so that we can fit literally more functions on each of the panes as well, which has been a nice little addition for us.
Yeah, and I know you had mentioned as well that there are like some very minor, like totally cosmetic changes that took place as well. Like contrast should be a little bit more improved, should be a little bit just easier to see the differences between cells, headers, and like main text cells. Some of the fonts and things like that should kind of just look a little sharper, so on.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think you said it best. This is probably where things are going to start to look the most different. Do you want to kind of just start by introducing people to what they're seeing here? I'll kind of follow along on screen and chime in here.
Sure. So I think the biggest change across this whole panel is that the idea of the save to contests has been completely rethought. You see there in the row it says save to, and then it has listed your number of contests. So now we've abstracted that out up one level to the top. So you always know like what lineups you are currently like looking at and saving to, right? So if you were to hit the save button right now, you know that I am saving all of my lineups to these contests I currently have selected. Like that's where these lineups are going based on the fill method you've got selected. You'll also notice that the number of my lineups is the exact number you need to fill what is selected in that panel. So Jordan, if you make a change to say you want to just focus on a single one of your contests, like maybe just select, a single contest there and click off the pane, you will see that the number of lineups will change. It'll tell you exactly where you're saving to. And when you go to save, it's just going to save to that individual contest. So we've tried to make it much easier to like work on contests or groups of contests that you may want to work on at a specific time. And for those of you that like download your pools or save to favorites, those options are there as well. They're just inside the save to field. So you just select download or favorites from within there. So if you're the kind of person that's going to go through and fill all of your contests at once based on a large pool of lineups that you've curated, the way you would do that now is exactly how we showed, right? You just select the contest you want to save to. It'll update this panel accordingly, hit save, and it'll save your contests. The real power of this new method comes after these contest sims are done running, which I know Jordan is doing right now, because we have added some real amazing dynamic metrics calculations that are based off of what's selected in that save to field. You're likely going to see the table update a couple of times as the more sim results come in. We're going to clean this up here in the next week or so, but it's basically every time a new sim result gets published, it's refreshing your data here in the table. But essentially, if you go to that the rank by right there, Jordan, we have a new option in here in that rank by table. So just click that, called save to, which is, it's got the 5 core contest sim metrics listed in it. What this will do is select ROI as an example, Jordan.
Okay.
What this is going to do is rank your lineups based on the ROI of or whatever metric you've chosen, of what is selected in that save to field. So if you've got all of your contests selected, it is an average of the ROI of all of those contests. If you select a single contest, it is the ROI for that contest that you are seeing. It is dynamically updating based on what the selection you've made in that drop down is. And this applies also to filters and aggregate metrics as well. You can create filters and aggregate metrics that use that exact same functionality. So you can just select save to, and then you can select like an ROI greater than 0, and it will dynamically update your lineups to remove those that are under 0% ROI based on the contest or contests that you've got selected, which I think is really, really powerful and a huge time save in and of itself for people who either have already been trying to fill each contest individually or have wanted to do that, but the effort to do that has felt exceptionally daunting. This makes that so much easier. And the really cool thing about this is, if you see, we've got a panel down there called saved. That is a list of all the lineups that you have currently saved to contests at any point during this session. If you flip the toggle that says remove from pool that's on that header, as you're filling, it will basically give you unique lineups the next time you try to fill. So it's not trashing them, but it's also not going to give you those lineups again if you save again. So it's the equivalent of getting a unique lineup in every contest without having to list all of your contests all at the same time. You can go one by one and be assured that you are getting a unique lineup in every contest.
Cool. Yeah, so there's quite a bit to talk about here. I think this can look a little intimidating the first time you see it. I think what we should do here is walk through what I think is probably just objectively the best way to use this here, and explain that process just so people can kind of see it, and then talk about some of the other things that you can do here, or other ways that you can kind of express some additional control if you so choose here. But I think that the best way to do this, and is also kind of the coolest way to do this, is just a good thing to get here first. So I'm going to kind of reset a couple things back down here. So the big part of one of the big changes here is in this, the way that the save to contest has been overhauled here. So we do have a couple different options here, but this is basically like, where are your lineups going is basically what this is saying. So download CSV is exactly what you would expect. That means literally download a CSV with the lineups. That's where the lineups are going. Favorites is sending all 218 of these to the favorites column here. Single fill, the way that I've kind of really thought about this here, now that I've had a chance to play with this is basically as close to what the production app does right now. It's exactly, it's almost the exact same thing. It's the, we're filling the contests with these lineups here using your method in a way that like should feel very familiar. If it's unique random lineup here goes into each of these. If it's unique rank, top lineup goes into the top one. If it's rank, so on. I think the only thing that's really changed with single fill here now is if you are using, and this is an improvement, if you are using save to ROI, instead of having to pick a representative contest ROI that represents your entire portfolio, you'd be using the average ROI across all of your contest sims when you do the fill. So that's already kind of an improvement here. Having that like dynamic ROI that's updating, knowing, hey, I want the best lineup on average across all of my contest sims. But the real star of the show here is this multi-fill function here.
Yep.
Do you want to do the honors of kind of introducing this here, or would you like me to?
I will certainly try to do it justice, but I'm not
Okay.
sure anything I can do it justice. So this multi-fill is maybe the coolest new thing I think we've ever done. So you've got multi-fill selected, Jordan. If you want to, you can actually just click off of that that message there. So you see that your lineups pane has changed to a view of your contests right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that table, you see a few options. You've got, first of all, you got the options to reorder and sort and uncheck certain contests. So those are there. You've also got rank by and uniques as options within that table as well. What this is doing is allowing you to look at your entire portfolio and fill everything all at one time based on the settings that you have set. So based on the ranking metric you want to use, based on the filters you have applied, based on the exposures that you've got set for players and teams in the player table. And it is going to go one by one and fill each contest independently based on those changes that you have made. So rather than you having to go in and manually select the first contest, fill it, save all those lineups or trash all those lineups, go to the second. If you want like fine-grained control over making sure that each contest is kind of evaluated on its own merits, you have one stop here to do, it will go one by one. And after you, so in this case, if you hit save right now, Jordan, if you want to just hit save, I can just talk about what it's doing. It's going to, you'll see it'll pop up after a few seconds with the saved 200 whatever lineups to your contests up there. And what it did was it took the first contest, your four-seamer, saved 20 lineups as ranked by the four-seamer ROI. Since you're using unique rank, it removed those 20 lineups from the available pool, then moved to the second contest, filled the top 3 by that contest's ROI, removed those, filled the next one by that contest's ROI, etc. down the list to get you 200, 208. It's so small I can't read what that number says. But 218, I think it says. But to get you all of those lineups, unique lineups into those contests with one click that respects your exposures, locked players, filters, like I mentioned before, at each step along the way. Also giving you fine-grained control. If you want to use a different ranking metric for each one, like maybe you don't want to use the ROI for that contest. Maybe you want to use projected score or a custom metric that you have. You can do that as well. And also allowing you to set min uniques that are independent for each contest. Maybe you don't want to use min uniques for your 3 entries, right? But you do want to apply min uniques for your 20 maxes or 150s. You have fine-grained control over how many uniques you use in each contest as well. And we'll be adding more to this as we go forward. So like more settings and more things you can adjust on a contest by contest basis. But once you've curated your pool to be the lineups that you're comfortable with, again, based on exposures and things, this is easily, because you can do this in 5 seconds or less, depending on how many contests you have for the night. And you can get all of your contests filled independently from one another with one click. It is awesome and is a huge time save that gets you back to focusing on, like I said, getting the kinds of lineups you want into your set of lineups instead of wrestling with the tool to fill the way you want to fill.
Yeah, it's like a perfectly automated version of the best possible way you could have filled your lineups on production. But on production, I mean, if you've ever actually tried to do this, even for a relatively small portfolio of contests like I'm playing tonight here, I mean, it would give you brain damage. There were so many steps. You would have to first change your sorting method to the associated contest sim. adjust any min uniques or exposures at that point in the process, open up the save to contest modal, select only that contest, fill it, then change your sorting method again, and basically rinse and repeat for, with this portfolio, 8 different contests. And we are so focused on recommending people play a wide variety of contests to get a bunch of shots on goal in a given slate, to play against the weakest competition, to lower your variance. We believe that playing a lot of contests, playing a lot of entries is really important to be successful in DFS. The product was so at odds with being able to do that in the right way. It really is a massive, the first time you actually do this, it like clicks in this way that you want to do it over and over and over again. And it actually encourages you to want to play more contests, because it's pretty fun and satisfying to know I put the best 20 lineups in my pool into this contest here, and the best 3 lineups that were at least different from those 20 into this contest here, and the best 1 lineup into this contest. You're not only getting the value of having optimized your portfolio and your contest selection, but you've also very much optimized the lineups that ended up in each contest. I can be a bit of a nit about like really wanting to know that each lineup is really intended to go into a particular contest. And that always really stuck with me with the old processes of like knowing that it was kind of left up to a lot of chance, a lot of randomness on what went where. And this just feels so much better.
Yep. One other thing I will note about this method, Jordan, if you want to just look in the method drop down real quick, there's also a rank option.
Yes.
So there's unique rank and there's regular rank. So if you don't care about putting uniques in every contest, you can switch to rank and it will just give you the best X lineups while still doing the other things that we talked about, exposures and uniques and things like that, sorting by the rank, the method, the rank by method you've chosen, that sort of thing. So if you just want the best lineups, period, independent of them being unique, you can use the rank method here as well.
Yeah,
I know unique random is disabled there. There's no unique random version of this. That's just that's going to go away soon. So it's just rank and unique rank here right now.
Yeah, I want to touch on that a little more, because I think actually understanding why unique random is off helps you understand a little more of what's actually happening here. So first of all, rank first is actually a little bit different here than it is on the old site, in that if you were to fill by rank, you are not necessarily going to get the identical same 20 lineups in your solo shot and quarter jukebox. You would on the production version of the app, because you would be ranking by a singular 1 sorting method.
Yep.
And the same 20 lineups would appear in both contests. For this one, though these contests are very similar to one another, they're not identical to one another. The solo shot would get the top 20 ROI lineups for the solo shot. The quarter jukebox would get the top 20 quarter jukebox lineups. There would likely be some crossover there, but there wouldn't necessarily be for all 20.
Right. Exactly.
Unique random is disabled because we're not there. There's no sense of taking a lineup from your entire portfolio and randomly assigning it a contest. That doesn't, we assign a lineup to a contest because it is one of the top X lineups that could be played in that contest, where X is your entries, right? We're not randomly picking one of your lineups to be your pickoff lineup. Your pickoff lineup is the best possible one from your portfolio. So, and the difference between rank and unique rank is, with rank, it is objectively the best pickoff lineup is going into your pickoff contest. With unique rank, it is your best pickoff lineup that has not yet been used in the 4-seamer or the hot corner here is going in there.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So is using rank with remove from pool on the same as using unique rank with remove from pool off?
So remove from pool only applies after we've filled. So we remove the lineups from the pool after the fill has happened. So rank and unique rank is how you determine when you're filling, if you want to use unique lineups or not. So remove from pool doesn't really do anything except for if it's on when you start the fill. We will not use those 371 lineups that have already been used. If that makes sense. So it's not really controlling anything while we're filling. It's just for determining which lineups we should use before we fill and after we have filled to remove lineups from your available pool.
Yeah, this is
So
something.
in this case, go ahead, Jordan.
I was just going to say, this is something that I think is a little tricky to get to, and I think it's easiest just if you understand the actual steps that are happening here. So the way I've thought about this is upon saving lineups to any contests, regardless of whether this toggle is on or not off, those lineups now go to this saved category. It is not trash. It is not, it is just saved. Those that we're just registering, you put these lineups into a contest that you're playing. That is when you hit save. And that's whether you're doing multi-fill, whether you're doing single fill. If you hit save, the lineups that got saved are going to this category. When remove from pool is toggled, all of the lineups in the saved category are now removed from the pool. So subsequent saves will now not include those lineups in it because they have been removed from the pool. In terms of practical advice here, I think the way that I would recommend most people use this here is use the multi-fill. I like sorting by fee. I don't think that's a requirement. And use unique rank. And that will do the thing you kind of expect it to do. It will put a unique lineup. It'll put the best possible unique lineup into each of your contests in order of your entry fees.
Yep.
I think remove from pool is really something that only makes sense to incorporate if you are, for one reason or another, using a single fill method. It's kind of like an automation to the, I can't, somebody in Discord kind of came up with the idea of like sort by a certain, on the production app, sort by a certain sorting method, fill your 20 max or whatever, and then delete all 20 of those lineups you just filled. Remove from pool kind of does that, but it's actually almost even, I personally think, slightly obsolete against multi-fill, which just kind of does the thing you expect it to do in a little more of a direct way. Andrew, does that make sense? Because I actually do think this is one of the more confusing parts here to figure out what's going on. So if it's still a little unclear.
Yeah, no, I thought something a little bit different was happening. Yeah. I thought when you click save, it's filling the first 20 and then filling the next 3. And I thought that if remove from pool was on, it would take the first 20 out and then reevaluate for the 3 lineups. Right. But if rank was on, it would leave those 20, and then any of those 20 could be used in the 3. So that's why I was wondering if remove from pool mattered.
Yeah.
Cool. There was a question, and I'll do a quick run through the chat here to make sure we're catching up to questions here in a second. But I did see there was a question about risk-adjusted return on investment.
Yes. So this was another change that went in. So we actually internally had quite a bit of debate about this earlier this week. But with the recent changes to how we calculate ROI, we had kind of made risk-adjusted ROI obsolete anyway, because the correlation between it and ROI was incredibly high, like very strong. So rather than providing a decision point that actually has no real practical application, we are focused on the thing that we are confident in, which is our ROI calculation with our new, with our new ROI, our ConteSim ROI calculation. I think for those of you who have been defaulting to ROI, I think you can confidently use ROI and feel like you're not sacrificing anything of substance by making that change. It's really just to streamline, because they were so correlated to one another that it just did not make sense to keep both methods anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's also a reflection of how far the contest sims have come too. The quality of the field lineups has increased. The quality of the underlying game simulations has gone up quite a bit. So where risk adjusted was a little bit of a hedge against some of those bad assumptions early on, I think it's a little less needed now. I've had a ton of people reach out to me over the past couple weeks and ask, for baseball showdown, ROI or risk adjusted ROI, for MMA, ROI or risk adjusted ROI. And like, to almost all those answers, most of the time I would just say, either's fine. It doesn't really matter. And that is kind of why now, if they don't matter, why are there two of them? So,
I want to take a step back too, Jordan, just real quick at like a higher, like 30,000 foot view here.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll notice this as you're using the app and in the coming weeks as we release new features. We've also tried to get away from assuming that we know what people want to do. In a lot of cases, you mentioned when you open the app, you'll get the slate select now. We're not going to try to figure out what slate you want to play. We're going to let you tell us what slate you want to play, right?
Yeah,
when it comes to risk adjustment, we're going to let you decide how you want to adjust for risk, right? Rather than us telling you to adjust your ROI this way. If you want to adjust for risk with min uniques, use min uniques. If you want to use exposure caps, use exposure caps. If you want a custom metric that kind of weights cash rate a little bit to go along with ROI, you can do that yourself rather than us telling you that there's this weird black box of risk adjusted ROI that we're going to give you. You have the power to determine how you want to adjust for risk, if at all.
Yeah, no, it's well said. I did want to address this as well. We talked about Sal. We talked about this, I want to say about 20 minutes ago in quite a bit of detail here. So I'd rewind and check out that conversation as well, maybe once the stream ends. But for those that missed that here, the build settings drop downs have been removed. You'll see kind of just a default slider for the sport and slate size in question. I think the easiest way to summarize the kind of the why for this is that the way that your lineups are selected to go into particular contests post build, whether that's contest sims or whether that's SaberScore, are far more impactful than the pre-build slider settings. Our recommendations and the way we internally as a team used these tools had overwhelmingly just become like use basically like something resembling the 20 max 10 to 50K entrance. Somewhere around that line is like your baseline sliders. Everybody used those for almost everything. That's now just the defaults. Scott made a good point here before of like, if you had default build settings that you had become accustomed to and liked where you adjusted these, feel free to do so. They are still here and adjustable for a reason. But the build drop downs are kind of a relic of a much earlier version of SaberSim that just don't really reflect the way that we think contest lineups should be selected to enter into particular contests anymore. So, okay, let's see. This is a good question here. I see some other, I'll mention here as well. I see some other questions like just popping in that kind of look like more typical office hours questions. We have about 18 minutes left here. I want to stay as focused as we can on questions about the new beta app. So if you have questions about beta, fire away. And yeah, so
we'll resume normal office hours tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So from what I'm understanding, for example, I built 218 lineups, but then you hit the save button and it saved all contests, but lineups are duplicated in contests. It reevaluates the lineups, meaning duplicate lineups will go into another contest. So if I'm reading this question correctly, that will not happen if unique rank is selected when you're using the multi-fill because of the unique port component of that. So if I do this again, just as an example, the 20 lineups that are entered into the four-seamer, they're the best 20 by four-seamer ROI. They are removed from contention to be entered into any other contest at that point. So even if one of those lineups is the best possible lineup that could have been played in the hot corner by hot corner ROI, because I've selected unique rank as my fill method, it cannot enter into that contest. So it will get the next best 3 lineups outside of that, and then so on down the list. So by the time we get to the quarter jukebox is going to get its best 20 possible lineups sorted by ROI, with the exception of the other 198 lineups that have already been chosen for other contests. So if you are comfortable with duplicates, you can change to rank. How's that sound, Scott?
That's exactly right. 100% right. Yep. 100% right.
Cool.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Are there still 3 tabs in the contest tab as far as like contest flashback goes? Is that all the same?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Everything about, we have not touched other than some rearranging of some components flashback, leaderboards, all that is still functionally identical. One thing you can do here easier now than before, Jordan, I think actually this is a good one. If you click on a contest name before the contest has started, it's much easier to just see the lineups you have in that contest.
Very cool.
So
Yeah.
if you don't trust us yet and you want to make sure we put the right lineups in the contest, you can easily come here and see which 20 lineups are in each contest. And then if you want to reset back to the normal all of my entries view, just click the contest tab again and it will refresh the page and you'll get all your 218 contests again. And then once the contests have started, then we'll get into showing live leaderboards and live contest data.
On that note, I did want to call out something I noticed earlier working on a video, just because I think it is a little tricky the first time you see it here. If we look at yesterday's flagship, the users column did move to a different pane here, which I actually do think makes a lot of sense, because this is like player projections, right? It's weird that this table changes completely from baseball players to DFS players upon changing tabs. So users is just over here now. So if we make that nice and big, same data, but tucked into kind of a different tab here. So, Scott, you want to talk on just kind of general time frame, what we're thinking of here for beta, for a beta for potentially the starter and standard subscribers, but also a production release?
Yeah, so I think the production release is probably a little bit easier to answer. If the next week or so goes well, I mean, I don't, goes well is kind of subjective, right? And I think we will have something resembling a soft launch to everyone before NFL season. This soft launch, just to assure everyone, will likely include a way to continue to use the existing application in case you're just not comfortable using this yet for week 1 of NFL. That being said, I don't think we're going to be live with the old version for almost a year like we did with classic SaberSim before. We're talking weeks of both being in parallel versus months or almost a year of that. But I do think that both options will be available for week 1 of NFL. But then sometime after the first week or 2 of the season is when we'll get closer to sunsetting the old version entirely. But again, we don't have a fixed date on that. Some of that's going to come down to the feedback and any issues that we need to address here, new features that we want to add, stuff like that. It's just it's kind of not a moving target, but we want to make sure we do it right. We don't want to force this on people if there are issues or if there's workflows that we haven't really considered well enough that you literally can't do in the new workflow. That's really that. In terms of opening this up to everyone, I think it is very likely that will occur by Monday. I don't know if it's going to be Friday or Saturday or Monday, but I do think by the start of week 1, when you would start building lineups for week 1, I should say, which we kind of target around Labor Day, Monday, Tuesday of next week. I think everyone will have access, whether that's via the beta site or via 2 separate URLs, one for the new version, one for the old version. So if you don't currently have access, I would expect that in about 5 days you should be able to get access, give or take.
Yeah, and if you do, please try it out. I mean, one, just because we really believe it's better. Upon my first experience with filling my entries, it feels a little weird the first time. I think anytime as DFS players, anytime you change the way you're ultimately getting the lineups into the contest, that just has this little bit of this uncomfortable, I don't know about this. The old way I did it worked just fine. The first time you do this, it's a game changing. It feels really cool. And if it doesn't feel that way to you, or if it's confusing, or you don't know what's going on, or it feels like something happened incorrect, that's let us know in the Discord, because we hope it feels like that. And that was the goal here. But I really do think for most of you guys out there, the first time you go through this, it will feel a lot better. But different folks have different processes. Different people are doing different things. So there might be things that we didn't think about here. Potentially on that note, this was a question from Discord. I want to touch on this quickly here. Are the exposures now set to based upon what lineups you are saving to? Meaning if you just filter to show or save to a 20 max and make exposure adjustments and save, this is a good question, then switch to your next contest, do those exposures reset again, then I guess you can see the saved ones at the end to see
I,
overall exposures. That's a good question, actually.
I think so. I think if I'm reading this right, it's does the exposure changes, like, are they linked to contest or not? Is that what
Yes,
I'm
I
seeing
think
here?
so. Yeah.
They are not. So any changes you make to exposures in the table will apply every time it tries to save. We're not going to like
Okay.
reset or change. However, I think in the very near future, as a fast follow, there will be an option within that table to ignore max exposures. So that if you have like single entries in there where you wouldn't want your max exposures applied on a single entry contest or maybe a 3 max, where we will ignore max exposures in the table on a contest by contest basis so that you can more easily fill multi-entry and single entry in the same batch without without worrying that like a really good player won't be in your single entries because you've set exposure less than 100% on that player. But at the moment, each contest is evaluated independently of each other contest, but there's no way to like change the exposures on a contest by contest basis. So if you set, like, we'll use Freddie Peralta here as the example. If you set a 50% max exposure cap on Freddie Peralta, he will be capped at 50% in each individual contest, and there's no way to adjust that without like unselecting the contest and then like doing a different fill with like 75% or 30% if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, and I think that in general feels kind of like a feature. That's
Yeah.
kind of how this was designed, is like, and I think that's part of what is the cool part about this, is that like when each of these contests gets filled, it respects those exposures. If you have very contest specific exposures that you want to respect, I would think the two ways you might go about doing that, one would be doing things more with a
Yeah.
single fill type approach where you're kind of intentionally setting things the way you want them
Yeah.
to be, kind of like what you do on production, and then picking the contest that goes into, or even potentially just breaking off into a different build and splitting things off that way.
Yeah. I definitely think that you're right, Jordan, that if you really want fine-grained control on a contest by contest basis like that, the new fill method is probably not for you. I think, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be for everyone, right? If you really want that level of like hand in the dirt, I want each contest to be a carefully curated set of lineups that match what I think should be played in this contest, then that's why the other fill method exists, right? So you can keep doing things kind of the way they've always been, but better, like more dynamic, right? Really respecting like your other selections while it's working.
Let's see, a couple other quick questions here. The mobile experience, I haven't even looked at it. How mobile optimized are we?
It is okay, but likely needs a bit more optimization. So I think it's probably usable,
Okay.
but there's some bugs that need to be fixed. And I think if you do try mobile like tonight, if you go to upload contests via mobile, you may need to turn to landscape mode when you go to upload your contest, because the upload doesn't work unless it's in landscape mode. But we do know that there's some mobile cleanup we need to do. The focus right now has been on getting this ready for desktop, which is where the vast majority of our users are meeting us, at least before a slate begins. I will also note, just as it's a related thing, late swap is working, but I'm not 100% convinced that there aren't still a few bugs, particularly with the new fill method and late swap. So it's not a huge deal. MLB is not a big late swap sport, but if you do need to do a late swap, I might recommend either using the production app for late swap still, or using the the single fill method rather than multi-fill. Just until we're 100% sure that multi-fill is working with late swap.
Hey, Jordan, or Scott,
Yeah.
did swaps per lineup go away here?
No, it's still in the settings menu, or it should still be in the settings menu anyway.
Oh,
The gear icon menu. Gotcha.
cool.
Thank you.
Good to know.
As an aside on this probably doesn't matter to most people. I still want to change how we do this. I don't love the swaps per lineup, and I will mea culpa. That's my idea. It was my idea, so I'm the idiot that put this in there. I don't. I think it's confusing, and I think there's probably better ways that we can do this. Kind of back to the old way where you say how many total lineups you might want, and then we try to just get you as close to that as we can. So I think there's still some improvement there, and I think if you're an NBA player, just I think stay tuned for NBA season. I think we're going to have some really cool stuff coming for late swap, specifically before NBA. So bear with us.
Yeah, I ran through this earlier. I wanted to just take a quick look since you had mentioned it. And it appeared to work just fine for me. The methods though, like there is no single fill, multi-fill here. It's just late swap as the fill, which kind of makes
Okay,
sense.
good. Okay,
Thinking
yeah,
about how
we must have. Yeah, I think we addressed that yesterday. I forgot that we had addressed that yesterday.
yeah.
And I think we fixed issues we had with saving to individual contests. There was a bit of an issue about a week ago when you were like selecting individual contests to save to, and then like going to different, like going one at a time or things like that. There were never any issues saving to all of your contests at once. So if that's all you're doing, should be fine. But if you run into bugs with late swap, please let me know. As you can probably imagine, those are also amongst the toughest to test for and
Yeah.
find because late swap is so unique. So I would definitely appreciate any notes about late swap bugs people run into because we want to try to squash those before NFL if we can.
If I were to actually fill here at this point, I am filling by an average ROI amongst all 8 contests, right? That's
Correct.
essentially okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it still tries to rank the lineups with kind of like the parent versus child kind of thought process we rolled out. What was that, 9 months ago, whatever that was. But yes, it's still using the average of the different contests, which I know for late swap in particular is probably not great.
Yeah.
But again, I think we've got some ideas for a late swap overhaul before NBA that I think once it really starts to matter, we'll have something much better in place, I think.
Cool. Let's see, a couple last second questions. Samuel, it is just beta.sabersim.com. I think I did put a link in the office hours channel in Discord, but you should just be able to access it from there. Let's see, John said, so if using unique rank, is it using the correct sim for each contest or is it using one sim for all? It for pre-lock, it is the correct ROI for the individual contest that's being.
If you want to go back to that table real quick, Jordan, we can actually point out you can set at the contest level which sim to use as well too. So if you want to use like a different ranking method for each contest, like if you want to use projected score for some reason on one of them or some custom metric you've created, it's not only just using what's selected in the drop down, but each contest will get the method that you've selected in the table. But yes, it is independent of each contest is independently evaluated, not by average ROI.
Dr. 2-inch said, have you considered a weighted ROI based on volume rather than average?
That's not really a question for me.
Yeah.
I don't recall any conversations like this coming up, but who knows what the models team has been cooking in their kitchen. So I can't answer that though. I truly don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, on a practical level, like the weighted average itself is really only a thing for the purposes of displaying your exposures and things like that here. Because ultimately what gets filled into the lineup, the contest, is the right lineups for that contest's ROI. There is obviously the exception of late swap, which we just discussed, and only really in theory temporarily. But I imagine like the solution there probably is also a very similar one where we just take the contest specific ROI on a per contest level. So yeah, I could see a situation where either by total number of entries or by total dollars spent, a weighted average ROI making more sense, but it actually doesn't really practically affect very much,
I-
if I'm thinking
I
through this
will
correctly.
say, now that I've thought about this a little bit, Jordan, one thing that I think we are going to add is the ability to build a custom metric based on multiple contest sim outputs. So
Yeah.
if soon you might be able to build your own version of that. Right now you can't. It's still kind of the old custom metric creation where it just uses the selected destination or save to ROI. But I think very soon you'll be able to do multiple contest sim outputs in a single metric, which would let you build one yourself that weights them however you would want to weight them, rather than again us trying to figure out how you want different contests weighted.
I actually had this question come up earlier here as well, and we've got a couple minutes left here, and then we'll wrap up. But do you know, like, how do we? Is there a way to delete contests?
Nope, not right now. There's no
Okay.
way to delete them right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I made one
Uh,
earlier messing around, and then I
you
couldn't figure out how to
Yeah,
get
you're
rid of it.
better served editing than deleting. And if you have an extra one, then we're just running extra contests, and you can just ignore it when
Okay.
when you're looking at your metrics. But we don't have a concept of delete at the moment. I think at some point we might. But if you just add a custom one real quick for me, just so yeah. So once you're there, you can edit everything in that table for that. So if you don't like it, you can change the values directly in the
Yeah.
table right there. But yeah, the
So
delete doesn't exist. We will probably add that, but right now it's just you just have an extra sim
on a
if you create one you don't want.
on a similar note, is there a way for me to associate this contest sim with like the one I want to use for a contest I'm playing? Like,
Not yet, but
okay,
I would expect that will happen. I don't want to promise like next week or something like that, but that is something I want to do, particularly for like FanDuel and other
right.
site users
Yeah.
who end up having to create more custom sims. It's not there yet, but I do think it'll be there. Like I said, in the not too distant future. For now, you would just have to select your contest sim as the rank by method when you build your lineups. If when you want to use that, we'll still fill using that, but we don't have a way to associate it for the destination like ROI or win rate yet.
Okay, cool. All right. I think that's a good opportunity for us to leave things off at. I know Andrew is chomping at the bit here to get the build review show fired up and running for today. So we'll leave things there. But again, we can continue the conversation here in Discord. The beta feedback channel is a great place to ask any questions. I will be keeping my eye in there as much as possible. Scott, I'm sure you'll be looking to see feedback in there as well. So if there are questions, any comments, things that you're just confused by, or even if there are things that you're really enjoying and find quite a bit easier to use, please let us know in that beta feedback channel. Any last second comments here from either you guys, Scott or Andrew?
I was going to make a joke about how you should send all like compliments to me and all complaints to you, Jordan, but I don't know. It feels like that started like 20 seconds ago, so probably not as funny as I wanted it to be. No, I don't think so.
Funny.
I look. I will say this to anybody who's still bearing with me. We released what we called 3.0, SaberSim 3.0, around this time last year, which was the big UI update but didn't really functionally change how SaberSim worked, the workflow really. It was just a really big UI update. To me, I'm more excited about this than anything we did at 3.0. I think this is actually, from a front end product perspective, potentially the biggest change we have made in years, because I think it improves so many parts of the process from getting from contests to entries, that I think until you like really get familiar with it and play around with it, it's not even obvious how much of an improvement is until you actually have seen it for yourself. But I'm super excited about this. It's the biggest thing we've done since I've been here, I think, from a front end perspective.
Yeah, I one of the things that jumped out to me when I was playing around with this is I think when we published contest sims and came out with that for the first time, kind of a key assumption of SaberSim broke at that point, and that assumption was on the old versions of SaberSim, you worked in this framework of sorting method was not something that needed to be changed very much, if ever. And with contest sims, that changed quite a bit. If you were playing optimally, all of a sudden it became something that you kind of wanted to change every single contest. And it was always this huge tension point of like, you
Mhm.
should want to change it, and it is so annoying to have to change it and handle all the things that are
Yep.
related to that. So this is kind of coming full circle with contest sims in my mind, is especially really what this does. That's not to say it's not better for standard or pro either.
Right.
But that's really, I think you'll really feel it. So
Yep.
Andrew, any final thoughts, or are you ready to just get these build reviews going for folks?
I was actually curious the answer to Sean's question here, if this does anything.
So if you you can't uncheck it for one of your contests, like if it's a contest in your entries, but you can add a sim for a contest you are not in. Unstarring it will basically turn that sim off. So you can turn a sim off if you create it with the star.
So that's
and
kind of
looks like
like
we fixed-
deleting it.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not literally
so we fixed it.
deleting
Yeah,
it, but
yeah, it just it doesn't delete it; it turns it off. That wasn't working 2 days ago. Looks like we fixed it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so basically, it just says like turn this sim off. Basically, is what that does.
Cool.
But you cannot do that for your own entries because we don't want to move those out of the top of the list. Like those are like always there, so you cannot turn your own entries off.
With a nice handy tooltip that tells you just as much.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Yep.
Scott, you've thought of everything.
I've forgotten more things about this than I remember at this point. It's been I made a joke with Jordan beforehand that if you don't hear from me on Discord for a while, it's because the product team is just like cooking, and we've been cooking for a few weeks, and that's why I've been quiet. And there's been so much that's gone into this, like literally probably close to 1,000 changes in one way, shape, or form in here. It's pretty crazy.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to play around with it more as well. Again, beta feedback channel in Discord for all of your comments, questions, feedback. We will go ahead and end things there. Andrew, do you do the should I leave this open for you, or do you jump to a different link?
No, you can close this down.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out. And enjoy the new updates, and we'll chat soon.
See you guys. Bye.
See ya.